Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. We move on to our next story. US President Donald Trump is set to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin at 10 a.m. EDT to discuss a potential peace deal for Ukraine. European leaders are urging the Kremlin to accept an immediate ceasefire as the war, now the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II, continues to escalate. Trump, who has repeatedly called for an end to the bloodshed, plans to also speak with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and NATO leaders. Despite growing pressure, Putin has remained firm on his conditions for peace, demanding Ukraine to drop its NATO ambitions and withdraw from territories Russia claims. Over the weekend, Russia launched its largest drone attack on Ukraine since the start of the conflict. European leaders fear Trump could press for a peace deal that leaves Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. With diplomatic talks underway and the fighting intensifying, the world awaits the outcome of this high-stakes dialogue. We have guest Professor Vasilin Ivanov, Popovsky Professor and Vice Dean, General Global Laws and School, joining us from New Delhi. Doctor, is there any indication that Ukraine or NATO members are open to compromising on Putin's demands?
I don't think they are compromising, and there is no point to compromise. Putin's demands are nonsensical. In fact, in Istanbul a couple of days ago, the Russian delegation demanded Ukraine to withdraw from the 4 regions that Russia claimed. And they said that if you don't do that, we will claim another 2 regions. So Russia couldn't militarily occupy the 4 regions for the last 3 years and 3 months. They demand Ukraine to give up what they couldn't militarily take. And they say, as a threat, we will demand another 2 regions, which Russia can never take with any military force. So this is absolutely nonsensical game, what the Russian demands are. Everybody in Europe and most of the world realizes that. The only question is when Donald Trump and American administration will realize that, hopefully very soon, hopefully over these phone calls that is going to happen very soon now. Again, some people miss time, they law intelligent, and they need longer time to realize what everybody realizes. We understand that, but hopefully Donald Trump and the rest of the administration will get to the point what is truth, what is false, how long Vladimir Putin can play those games, those maneuvers. And at some point, really, I expect those phone calls to stop and American administration to do what everybody else does. Sanctions on Russia, increasing sanctions, including secondary sanctions, and continuous support, including military support for Ukraine.
And Professor, what does Ukraine stand to lose or gain if it agrees to Putin's conditions?
Well, it loses everything. Putin wants everything. He wants the entire Ukraine. He say 4 regions, but his ultimate goal, remember 3.5 years ago, he was talking about regime change in Ukraine. He wants to impose his own puppet as next president. They challenge Zelensky as a legitimate, democratically elected president. So Ukraine is losing everything if they accept Putin's demand, and that's why they are fighting for their survival. They are fighting for their children, for their families, and they will fight until they achieve what every country in the world should have: territorial sovereignty, political independence, non-interference in its domestic affairs. So these are principles of international law, and they are long established. 8 years ago, the United Nations was created, putting those norms, non-aggression, territorial integrity into the UN Charter, and paradoxically, the Soviet Union was one of the 5 victors of the Second World War, given the status of guardian of peace. And today, Vladimir Putin does exactly the opposite of what a guardian for peace should do. Aggressive war against Ukraine, war crimes daily. Over the last night, there was the biggest drone attack in the history of this war. Another casualty in Kiev, 4 people, 1 child injured. This is not the way to negotiate with Putin. Somebody who has proven again and again that he doesn't want peace, he continues to kill children, abducting children before that, torturing its own people, by the way. It's interesting, why does Russia mobilize North Korean soldiers? Good question. Because they don't have Russians left anymore. There are no longer Russians left. They lost millions of Russian soldiers, so they went to North Korea to bring soldiers from there. So Russia is not winning the war, Russia is losing the war. And obviously, with strong sanctions, I repeat myself, sanctions on Russia, no negotiations, and full support of Ukraine. This is the road to peace.
And thank you so much for joining us, Professor Veselin Ivanov-Popovsky. As we move on to our next story, in what's being called the most significant